what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy this.
We broke down yesterday during the show. Not often do we get actual breaking news during the show, but we got it early on yesterday. Bo Davis out as the LSU defensive line coach, is going to be the D-line coach for the New Orleans Saints. Well, now LSU, late in the game as we approach March here, has to replace a defensive line coach. Well, who is out there? Who is available? And there's a couple of different names that are going to have ties to LSU. They're going to have ties to Louisiana. Tay, I'll kind of lean on you during this as well. But one of the ones that I think a lot of people are going to point to, Dennis Johnson, Meatball, right? He is the defensive line coach for the Baltimore Ravens. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Bo Davis, with a lot of these coaches. And I know Matt did kind of a full segment on coaches that are either head coaches in college football that become coordinators, or coaches that are in the college game and kind of been in the college game that decide to go to the professional ranks because the game's changed. I know he mentioned Coach Saban retiring, and Dennis Johnson, to me, is somebody that's in a great spot. He's in a great organization, the Baltimore Ravens. They do everything first class. They've got a good defensive front. They had a good year a year ago, and even though Meatball played here, has coached here, loves it here, I just don't see somebody leaving an organization like the Ravens to take any college job, not even LSU, not even where you played. And so, Tay, I don't know how you feel about this one. I just don't see this one being a realistic situation where LSU is going to pull somebody from the Ravens.
No, because if nothing else, like what do we hear all the time? The coaches are tired of the complexities of a college game. I seriously doubt somebody like him who's been there, done that in the college game would leave the NFL, go back to the college ranks. I don't really see this one. Now, would it be a good hire? Absolutely it would be. But yeah, this is one of those ones where it's like, hey, let's try to find a name with a little bit of similarity, see if you can get that one to stick. Yeah, I don't know how realistic this one is.
Another one on this list, Al Davis from Missouri. So as we know, when LSU hired Blake Baker, he brought 2 assistants from Missouri to Baton Rouge, and they were all together at Mizzou. And when you look at what that defense was when Blake was there, they had really good defensive tackles, and they had good defensive tackles a year ago as well. So you could ask yourself the question, okay, well, why didn't Al Davis come over with Blake the first time? What is the relationship there? Or maybe just the timing wasn't right, but there is a tie. There is a tie to Blake Baker. Now, my man Drink might just
He's gonna have to
blow up.
Kelly's gonna have to square up.
He might have to, like, on the spot if LSU goes and takes another coach from Missouri. But look, this makes sense. I mean, Davis is somebody that's been a good recruiter. He spent time at Arkansas, knows the SEC, and depending on what that relationship is, I mean, you have Kevin Peoples and you have Davis who work together at Mizzou, and that feels like that would be the one that would translate the fastest.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes sense, right? Because not only the Blake Baker factor, the Kevin Peoples factor, they've worked together before. I like this one. Again, I don't see Eli Drinkwitz losing another coordinator or another position coach to LSU without a heck of a fight. But I like this one. Fit-wise, it's good, and they've had a good D-line for a number of years. This one, to me, like, seems a lot more gettable than Dennis Johnson.
Gerald, Chapman's another name that is on this list, and this list is on LSUTigersWire.com, part of the USA Today network, if you want to check it out for you. Now, we know Chapman is somebody that has been throughout Louisiana. He has had 2 different stints here at LSU. He has been Tulane's defensive line coach. He has since joined the Florida Gators staff there, but this is somebody that is familiar within the building. He is somebody that knows current players on this team. He is somebody that has worked with players that are going to be on this defensive line when you look at like Jacobin Guillory. So like this would be another one that would be kind of a plug and play.
Yeah, it makes sense. Is he as high on LSU's list as the other two guys? Probably not. But, I mean, look, to your point, like, the resume is what it is. He's done it for a number of years. I think he's probably gettable, probably even more so than the first two guys you mentioned. So, I mean, you know, if LSU feels like he's the right fit, I mean, I don't see why not take a stab at it. Because, look, again, you're replacing Bo Davis. Are you going to replace Bo Davis with a guy just as good? Probably not, right? At least not a sure thing. But you bring in a guy, you give him the tools to be great. Like, I don't see why not. I like Chapman.
I believe I saw a stat that Jacobin Guillory is now going to play for his 8th defensive line coach in his 6 years at LSU. In 2020, he had Bill Johnson. In 2021, Andre Carter. In 2022, Jamar Cain. In 2023, Jimmy Lindsey, and then Pete Jenkins. And then 2024, he had Bo Davis. So he's going to have a new one in 2025. And, yeah, he spent 6 years here. So, you know, that is an extra year than we typically would see even with a red shirt. But that is a wild stat. That is – actually, I don't love that. And this is multiple head coaches, so it's not just Brian Kelly and his staff that's had the overturn here. I mean, that's 8 coaches in 6 years. Now, some of those, look, you had like Jimmy Lindsey. We all know what he was going through in a medical condition, so that's not something that you can help. But that's kind of an alarming number, minus the kinda.
Yeah, I mean, you see quarterbacks in the NFL, Jake. Like, they have a new offensive coordinator every single year. Like, for example, I think Baker Mayfield's on his 8th offensive coordinator in 9 seasons in the NFL. I mean, at least he has the same head coach now. But, I mean, look, that can hinder you. And at least for him, he's played for 4 different teams now. Jacoby and Guillory, 6 years in one spot, a different defensive line coach every single year is tough. The only good news is he's been there, done that, right? Like, he's been in this program. He hadn't played a ton because of injury, but, I mean, Jacobian's a pro at this point. I mean, he's a grown man. I mean, he's got to be 23 years old at this point. So, like, I think if anybody, Jacobian will probably be fine because, you know, at this point in his career, he probably has a technique that he follows. How much is a D-line coach going to make a difference? I don't know, but it is tough nonetheless.
T-Rob at South Carolina is on this list now. He is currently, coaching where he went to school. So that one's going to be difficult. I mean, Louisiana connection from being at Tulane, but when you're at your spot, not to say that you can't leave. We've seen it happen before, but it's just not going to be likely. A name that I didn't actually see on this list that I would be intrigued by is Terrence Knighton. Now, he went from Nebraska to Florida State here in this offseason. This is somebody that I played with in the NFL. Very smart football player, hard worker, rising star really in the coaching game. And I know he just went to Florida State, again, this offseason. That does not mean that you can't take another job. Like, nothing is off the table. I think he's one of the best defensive line coaches in the country, certainly that nobody talks about. I would put him a top 5 guy, and not because he was my teammate, just because I saw what he did at Nebraska a year ago. Go back and watch the Colorado versus Nebraska game and watch the defensive tackles in that game. It'll give you a really good idea of what Knighton's capable of. Again, not on this list, just took a new job, but nothing is off the table when you're looking, when I don't want to say you're desperate because it's LSU, they're going to get a good coach, but just the timeline as you get ready to start spring practice here coming up, you want to have that spot filled. So you'd be willing to maybe give a little bit more than you normally would just because of the timeline. So that's another name to pay attention to. Calvin Thibodeau is on this list from SMU. So, all right, yeah, sure. I mean, he spent time at Oklahoma, so he's spent time at a big time program. I don't see this one being a fit. He's at, like I said, he's at SMU. Hadn't been there very long, so that's not a name that I would pay a lot of attention to. Although I understand why it is on this list, and so that's what it is. That's kind of the list. That's a lot of what people think maybe is going to be out there for your defensive line coach. And again, I mean, you're coaching the interior. So you got Kevin Peoples still on the outside. Who's going to be that coach there for the interior? And I would assume, Taylor, they're going to have somebody before spring practice. And so I would think before next week's over, we're going to know who the new D-line coach is going to be.
I would imagine. And look, Jake, if you're trying to swing for the fences, There's two names that I think I would make the call early, and they are both SEC D-line coaches. The first one is Rodney Gardner from Tennessee. He has had an incredible defensive line for multiple years now. He's been a really solid recruiter. Only problem with Rodney Gardner is he will be 59 in June. Not that that's old for a college coach. Does he want to start over being almost 60 years old? He seems entrenched there. He makes $775,000 a year. Again, LSU was paying Bo Davis $1.25, so you could probably match that, even give him a slight raise. Another guy's Randall Joyner from Ole Miss. Look, he's a lot younger than Rodney Gardner. He's had a defensive line that's been really solid for multiple years, and he's recruited these same areas that LSU does, that Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi area. Also, Rodney Gardner's salary from last season in 2024 was $725,000.
Yeah.
If you really want to swing for the fences, you call those guys and be like, hey, you want to make $900K a year? You want to make close to $1 million a year? If you think they're good enough, make the call. I mean, it's not going to hurt. I think they're going to be tough to get because they're both entrenched in rival SEC programs. But, I mean, hey, why not?
Yeah, Bo Davis made 1.25 last year. Trey Scott at Georgia made 1.2. Larry Johnson at Ohio State made 1.1. Nick Easton at Clemson made 1.1. Freddie Roach at Alabama made $1 million. Rodney Gardner comes in a little bit under that, as you mentioned, $900,000 a year ago. So money's not going to be the issue, right? Money's not going to be the thing that holds you back. You were paying more than anybody else in the country was paying for your defensive line coach. So you're going to have the ability to spend. You're going to have the ability to be attractive because it is LSU, because you have the resources. You've got better players this year than you had a year ago. Your younger players kind of went through the fire last year. We're talking 4 or 5 star players that are going to be really good this year. And, oh, yeah, I can pay you more than anybody else is going to pay you because we already had that allotted. We're here, again, it's March tomorrow. Well, that was what you expected to pay. They're not going to bat an eye at paying somebody, if they're qualified, kind of a very similar amount. And you're going to have to. If you want to go steal somebody, if you want to go poach somebody, you can't just offer them what they were making or a little bit more. You got to overpay. But that's okay. If you go get the guy, if you get the right guy, I would assume that they're going to spend the same amount of money. And so you're going to get a name. You're going to get a name that's respected. You're going to get a name that everybody kind of knows within the coaching circles. I wouldn't panic. Do I think Bo Davis is a loss? I absolutely do, because I think of what he does on the field, off the field, and I think off the field in recruiting, but I think on the field, not only like what he does as far as the technical stuff in the defensive line. I think he's really good. I think he's got an old school nature to him and hand placement. I've seen him do his drills. I love everything he does, but I'm just talking about mentality. Bo didn't care who you were. The best player on the team, the worst player on the team, he's going to treat you the same, and it was hard-nosed. And this was when he was an assistant strength coach, like an assistant to the assistant strength coach when I was with him in 2004. He didn't care who you were. He was going to make sure you got your work done. It's the thing I loved about Bo Davis. Didn't care, never did, never will. I would like to see them get somebody that has that same mentality, kind of the same mentality of we are going to grind. We're going to do it in an old school way. I'm going to let you know if you screw up, because I think every defense needs that one coach. Not to say that they can't have those guys out there, but Bo Diddley, he was the guy that did it more than anybody else. So certainly going to be paying attention to who replaces our guy, Bo Davis, as he goes down the road to the New Orleans Saints.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.